Principles of Management students, hi, Catherine Robertson here. Hopefully you are having a wonderful July 4th. So this week we are looking at, this is my second attempt at the video for this week. I thought I had recorded the video and it had stopped recording partway through. That is all right. We are going to just plug right along through. All right, so this week, we're in week 5, chapters 11 and 12. And chapter 11 starts to talk about human resource management. And when we talk about human resource management, we are really looking at, I'm going to try and keep these videos somewhat short because I noticed that some folks aren't watching them, but that's okay. There are 6 sections in chapter 11. And chapter 11 really kind of goes into defining initially this idea of human resource management. And so there are, what did I tell you, 6 sections in chapter 11. The first section starts to talk about, this idea of the evolution of human resource management. And, what was the first things that started happening with having that component of an organization, human resources. And then starting to think about this idea of a compliance function, because as all through the 1900s, we started gaining more and more labor laws, right, that protect employees and provide certain regulation for companies to follow as to how they're to treat employees, right? Whether it's the American with Disabilities Act or the Family Leave Act, right? When you are the FMLA Act, which some of you might know about. So in chapter 11, and I'm going to scoot right back there. That first section starts to look at what were some of the initial approaches to HR, right? And really, this is like early 1900s as we started to see companies start to grow, right? We went from an agricultural country and into more production in the early part of the 1900s. And then as organizations began to grow and companies got larger, they realized they had to have some way to manage employees. So on page 343, we see some examples of labor law, and some labor laws that are already out there. And that is a whole section of law practice, right? This idea of labor law and regulations that protect employees. Some of you may have worked somewhere or currently work somewhere that you have some of the labor laws posted, maybe in a break room that says these are the things that you're entitled to as an employee. And the one I just heard about, and I have to confirm it, is that there are more things added to employers have to let women that are pregnant out for the appointments and for different things relating to the pregnancy. It's like a legal aspect, right? There are a lot of legal things relating to what things you can be excused from work. And so there are a lot of different items that come into play from a legal standpoint when we are looking at human resources. And that's really where the compliance component is in human resource management. Then we go into this idea of performance management and talking about let me double check that this is recording. Okay. How do we, employees outside of just giving them bonuses, right? So that's one way, having this pay for performance. Like if we do better, we hit certain targets, we get a bonus, right? Commission-based items, things like that. But really when we get paid for something, a bonus or whatnot, we still immediately we want our next one, right? So it never kind of ends when it comes to that idea of being paid for or paid bonuses and incentives that are only related to monetary. And so companies are constantly thinking about how do we motivate our employees in other ways? How do we promote company loyalty and more company buy-in, right? How do we do that? And so that's really when we think about performance management and measuring performance and offering incentive for performances. Section 4 starts to talk about how do we motivate employees. Then some theories relating to employee motivation and think about what motivates you, right? And some of the items that your employer might do or may not do that could help motivate you. And then in 11.5, how do you build an organization? How do you acquire talent? So the last 2 sections really are about acquiring talented individuals for your organization. How do you acquire them? And then how do you kind of corral them and maintain your talent pool? right? Keep them at your organization and empower them. And so that really, chapter 11 in the last section starts to talk about building some core competencies in those individuals. And so I have 2 questions for you from chapter 11, and that is on page 365, number 2 and number 10. Also, don't forget about, before I jump into the rest of chapter 11, the picking your chapter, right? So the project for this course is picking a chapter that you either like or you don't like. And then once you pick that chapter, you're going to develop a PowerPoint and a 7 to 10 page or 7 to 10 slide PowerPoint that kind of redefines that chapter. And in your own words, if you were to present that chapter, how would it look, right? And so really what that comes down to is maybe you pick a chapter that you don't like, or you didn't like how it was presented. Like the information was good, but you didn't really, it could maybe be presented in a way that was contextually advantageous, more contextually advantageous than maybe it was, either in the text, or maybe you didn't like the PowerPoint that was coordinating with the chapter, so on and so forth. So you're going to come up with your own. That will be due the last week. So be thinking about the different chapters and how you will summarize. It helps you practice your PowerPoint, drawing up a PowerPoint, right, and how you do that, and aesthetically, and then also thinking about the material, reflecting on material from a chapter, and then summarizing it. So there is make sure that you review read chapter 11, and then review the PowerPoint for chapter 11. There are 4 short videos: labor laws by company size, CNN, fined by the NLRB. There's this Office Space clip. So Office Space is a great movie from the 90s. It's kind of a parody about working in an office. And there's a short clip from that goes along with human resources. And then also the Google Virtual Job Fair. And really, the Google Virtual Job Fair is an example of how companies now, we're taking, this is a virtual class, right? How companies now really are, you don't have to go to Google headquarters to a job fair. Like you can go, they can really look and they can attract national, international talent through some of these virtual means. And so that's just an example there. And I did tell you the homework, right, for chapter 11. Let me just double check. Page 365, number 2 and 10. And then chapter 12 really starts to talk about diversity. That also is our discussion post for this week. And so there's 7 sections in chapter 12 relating to diversity, and some different models that we look at relating to diversity and how that fits in the workplace. And so the first section starts to talk about, what are some of those surface level diversity characteristics, right? And things that we all see: age, body size, visible disabilities, race, sex. Those are things that we notice right off the bat, right? A lot of those are being challenged, right, in this day and age. But those are some of the things that we see, but there's also non-observable hidden things like attitudes, values, beliefs. And those things come into play when we talk about diversity. And then looking at how diverse is your workforce. So think about your current job, maybe a previous job, and how that diversity within that organization, was there a lot, or maybe there wasn't there, right? Some of the Erie employers are not that diverse, others are. And so thinking about, how that really plays out in your organization, that's kind of what our discussion post is about this week. But how does that impact your company? That's the third section. If you have a lot of different perspectives, does that really put you above other companies, right? And help you grow in a more progressive and kind of prolific way? Are you able to then capture more nuances relating to different folks? And that also helps you then reach your customer base, a wider customer base. If you have a lot of different folks working for your organization that provide feedback relating to different cultures, different races, different sexes, different, all that comes into play, right? And so how does that impact the company internally, but also when you think about customers? Some of the challenges with diversity, right? Not only like things like language, but perspective. Some of us, maybe if we've only lived in Erie, we have a perspective that's Erie based. Some of us have lived all over the country, maybe all over the world. We have a lot of different things that we've experienced then in a sense, that maybe we can bring to the table and help with folks. Though there's also things to be said about if you've lived somewhere for a long time, you really get to know the inner workings of a community, right? Versus if you've lived a lot of different places. So there's good and bad to both sides, and all of that comes together when we talk about diversity and having different folks on board. And then the fifth section starts to talk about some of the different theories behind why diversity really is an important component of an organization and fostering diversity. Just make sure it's still recording. Yay! Okay. Because I lost my last recording after I had been talking for 25 minutes, right? I realized that it hadn't recorded. So fun. Saturday, right? Anyway. But we are having a beautiful Saturday out there for all of you that are here in Erie County today. All right. So the sixth section then, benefits and challenges of workplace diversity. So it really kind of dives into a lot of the benefits, right? And how, when there are learning opportunities within an organization, how bringing different perspectives to the table by the team, right, like enhances the whole learning process. And so thinking about, I clicked on a video, one of the videos for your week, relating to diversity. Thinking about how bringing the different life experiences, skills, and perspectives really kind of helps us understand the human condition, the human component. And that really is something that organizations struggle with. Understanding what, this whole idea of understanding what motivates employees and what makes a company successful versus a company that's maybe not so successful, right? And a lot of it has to do with this idea of the human condition and what really are we about, right? And we can kind of get a better handle on that when we hear different perspectives, and it lets us know that no matter what our experience is, like we're all in this together. And when workplaces have that, they get a lot of, this idea of inclusion in the workplace. People feel like they can be themselves and bring, their A game to work, right? And so we all want to feel that in a workspace, in a personal space. We want to feel like we don't have to shy away from being who we are in a workspace, right? And not shying away from who we are also benefits the other folks in the workplace. Being somebody else, right, in a workspace, or trying too hard to be somebody else, or people are all trying to be something they're not within a workspace, it creates a superficial inclusion, right? We don't need that. Who has time for that, right? Anyway, so thinking about, and then the last section talks about, how do we manage diversity and kind of harness the best factors and capabilities that diversity can bring to the table. So that is the last section. How do we create an open setting, right, where people feel that they can share their perspectives and feel that they can encourage open dialogue, or they can, how do we encourage open dialogue? How do we make people feel like they can, speak their mind? Our discussion posts are a lot like that. I try to make sure that we're all chiming in and, feel free to talk about things that happen to us, right? It's okay to talk about your workspace. That's what this class is kind of about. Things that you like, things that you don't like. It's not personal to your workspace. I mean, it kind of is to the management at some level, or to the company possibly. But when you're offering a critical eye, you're saying, well, this stuff is, the company might think it's working, but it's not actually working, right? You're seeing it play out, kind of like Undercover Boss goes into, if you've ever seen that television show, the owner of a company goes in and starts to work with, actual employees, and some of the things that have been put in place by management don't actually work when they are carried out, right? They might sound good in theory, but we all know that some things that sound good in theory don't actually play out in the real world very well. And so, that's an important component of when we're managing diversity. There might be some things that sound great, but do they really play out how they sound, right? Anyway, so chapter 12, then there's 3 short videos, diversity management, how to get serious about diversity and inclusion, and then another video about diversity and inclusion. There's also 5 homework questions, page 403, 279, 10, and 12. And then this week we have a discussion post that is relating to chapter 12, provide a concrete example of how different perspectives stemming from diversity can positively impact an organization or work group. You may use a real life example or make one up. So you could use something from a current workplace, a previous workspace, school. If you're recently out of high school, you can use something from there, or you could make something up, something maybe that you could see playing out in a certain way. 2 to 3 sentences. And this week,